Hello and thanks for joining us for Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration. I'm your host Alexis Avila, educator, online entrepreneur, and founder of tutoring and test prep firm Prepped and Polished, broadcasting today from beautiful South Natick, Massachusetts. Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration is your destination for groundbreaking insight from today's most influential educators, leaders, and minds on the planet. Our show is brought to you by Mommy to 5K program. My friend Jill of L3 Fitness has a terrific and affordable 12-week course for moms looking to get back into shape. To learn more about the Mommy to 5K, please visit l3fitness.com/m25k. And get to know the Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on Facebook at Prepped and Polished as well as on Twitter at Prep Polished. And thanks for everyone for tuning in today. Joining our show is Brian Ricks. Brian is educator and founder of 101 Homeschool Ideas. He has a PhD from BYU in educational leadership and has over 12 years of teaching experience. He's homeschooled his children off and on for over 5 years. Brian is a homeschool expert and helps parents, children, and other educators come up with enriching homeschool learning activities. We're grateful to have Brian on our show. He's going to share with us the amazing work he does for families and children, especially for those interested in getting schooled at their home. And to our listeners, you can submit a question at any time. It's radio@Prepped and Polished. Always appreciate hearing from you. Hey, Brian, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. I appreciate you having me.
Great. So I see that you live over there in Utah. So can you just...
Yeah, we're here in Utah. It's probably not quite as sunny as we'd like it, but we're warming up, coming out of the winter freeze.
Oh, perfect. Good to hear. So tell us just a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you came from.
Okay, I grew up in southeastern Idaho, and I grew up with one sister, and then when I was a junior in high school and my sister was a freshman, my parents had another little baby, so we had kind of a little caboose. I come from I don't know what you'd call it, dysfunctional, or maybe it's more typical than anything else. My parents struggled kind of with their relationship off and on, and I had a lot of experiences where I got to see how marriages could be better and how families could be better. And I say that with a lot of hesitation. Anytime I talk about my growing up, I always hesitate to talk about how it really was, because I love both my parents dearly, and I wouldn't ever want them to feel like I regretted the way I grew up. I actually really appreciated the challenges that growing up the way I did provided me, because I feel like I'm a better person because of them. Spent all of my life in southeastern Idaho, and then when I was 19, I left and served a 2-year mission for my church in the Dominican Republic. And that was kind of the first time I ever really learned to appreciate education. I remember having been down there for about 19 months, and talking to a missionary who was from the Dominican Republic, and talking about our plans of what we were going to do when we finished our time serving. And he was headed home. No hopes for education. There just was no opportunities for him in the Dominican Republic, and he was going to go home and help his dad try and make money and just try and exist. And it just hit me really what an enormous amount of opportunities I had in the United States coming back here, and so that kind of took me from it really changed the trajectory of my approach to education. I had just planned on kind of coming home and doing the 4-year college like everybody else did, and then getting some job. It didn't really matter what. And so when I came home and started looking at the courses and the opportunities that I had, I really took a more serious look than I'd ever looked at education before. And so that's why now I'm about 12 or 13 years removed from that experience. And I talk to some of my friends from high school and tell them I have a PhD, and they all their mouths kind of hit the floor. And so that experience really changed me. It really helped me see what a precious opportunity we have for education in this country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just a rewarding profession, to say the least.
It
Um,
really is.
and and tell us a little bit about how you got involved with schooling in the home, and you do a lot of that.
Okay, yeah, I actually grew up kind of with what I would say maybe the typical stereotypical view of homeschooling. I saw them as awkward and unsociable, and just it was something that I totally wanted to stay away. It was almost like a social leprosy, and I
Hmm.
just didn't want to touch that at all. And when our first child was 5 years old, uh, into kindergarten, my wife came to me and said, "I think I want to homeschool Peyton." And I put on the brakes, and the emergency brake, shoved it in a park. It was just didn't want to have anything to do with it, and I explained to her why, and we talked about it, and she said okay. And so then we got him into a charter school
Hmm.
that I thought would address all of her concerns about education. And what really kind of tipped the scale for me and got me to open my eyes and really research home education, Peyton was put into an advanced math group within his class. There were 6 little first graders, and as they approached the end of the first grade curriculum, the teacher had told us that she was going to move them on into second grade math, and we were very excited. This was about March of the school year. And we were very excited, and I kind of used that as an example to say, see, honey, the school systems can work. This is exactly what we wanted, and then all of a sudden, about April, he started coming home getting into trouble a lot, and we couldn't figure it out. It was very unlike him, and as a teacher myself, I came down on the teacher's side, and I explained to him that that was unacceptable, and he'd have to go and apologize to the teacher. And what happened 4 or 5 days in a row, we finally asked Peyton, what is everybody else doing when you're getting into trouble? And he said, well, they're doing math. And I said, why aren't you doing your math? And he said, I don't have any math. So we called the teacher, and what was supposed to happen is they were supposed to move on into second grade curriculum, and the second grade teachers and the administration had come to her and said, you can't move these 6 kids into second grade curriculum because then we won't have anything to teach them next year. So she was letting these 6 little first graders sit and do nothing for about 35 minutes while she was working on the other kids with their math problems. That helped me see that my son wasn't going to get, at least in that situation, was not going to get the individual attention that I wanted him to. I'm always really quick to say, Alexis, that I am not an anti-public school person. I believe
Right.
the public school system works great for a lot of people, and I'm extremely grateful for the men and women who dedicate their lives and give up careers that would provide more respect, more honor, more money, all to be a teacher to our children. So I'm very pro teacher. I love the teachers in the public school system.
Yeah, no, and it's evident, when you told me that, you homeschooled some of your children off and on, like parts at home and parts at school. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So we homeschooled Peyton for the first time in second grade, and we kind of started with our personal model was kindergarten and first grade. We always sent our kids to school. That gave them an opportunity to start to learn the social rules, how to sit in a desk and how to be polite and how to work with others. And my wife was really uncomfortable taking on the role of teaching them how to read, especially at the beginning. And for me, I think that reading is the foundation to learning in every subject. So I wanted to make sure that they were good and they were comfortable with that skill. And so we have every year addressed each child's needs, and sometimes even in the middle of the year. So, for example, 2 years ago, my wife got pregnant with one of our, number 6, and with morning sickness and everything else that comes with being pregnant, she and I came together and said, you know what? Wow, homeschooling isn't going to work right now for us. You don't have the energy or the strength or the health, so let's go find a school in our area and put them in a school with good teachers. And we did that, and our kids, with only a couple of minor exceptions, had a great experience for about 18 months about a year and a half while they did that schooling. And then it was when my wife's health returned and she got life back into order. Our baby was almost a year old. She came to me and said, it's time to start homeschooling again. And so we do that with each of our kids every year. Sometimes we feel like public school has something that they want. And now as my oldest is in 7th and will be in 8th grade next year, the way the school system is here in Utah, we have an opportunity where we can kind of do a hybrid, and we can homeschool him for some of the subjects, and we can have him go and do the maths or the sciences or anything that my wife's not comfortable with, or anything that I don't feel like I can help him with. We can have him do that. He can participate with sports. So it really, in most areas, I think parents who want to do some homeschooling but not all homeschooling, they really have a lot of options if they'll just open the communication with an administrator, a school administrator in their area.
And does the school administrator typically work with you on finalizing a curriculum that will allow him to get to the next level? Is it?
Yeah, I've never had, in fact, I've never had a problem. I've had some teachers that felt bad, and I understand. I've had teachers that felt like we were homeschooling because we didn't approve or we didn't think they were doing a good enough job. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm always quick to say I'm very pro teacher, and I'm really grateful that they're there. But typically when we sit down and explain the reasons why we homeschool, the administrators and everybody, they've always been very helpful.
Oh, that's great. Have you guys experienced any, I don't know if prejudice is the word, but like, kind of like that public, scorn, like, how dare you, you guys are doing a little bit out of the convention? And
a little bit, mostly from our family more than anything else. And my mom is an absolute sweetheart, and she's one of those that would never, ever give her 2 cents if she didn't feel like it was wanted. But when we said we were going to start homeschooling, she, like, visibly would almost have to bite her tongue and just not talk about schooling. But now that we've been doing it for so many years, and the kids have gone back to public school, probably one of the greatest experiences for me was when my oldest, who had been homeschooled for 4 years, went back to public school in the 6th grade, halfway through the 6th grade. And it was kind of like a moment of truth for us in our homeschooling. And he blended right in, not only academically, which we knew he would, but socially. He quickly made friends, quickly assimilated himself into the program. And when our parents and our brothers and sisters saw that, it was kind of like this, okay, what they're doing is working. And so that was kind of a moment of relief for us, and it removed some of that burden of, I guess, family outcastism.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you guys clearly prove that, homeschooling is effective when maybe other people might from preconceived notions thought different. Yeah.
And I think that's normal. And it's the thing that's interesting about homeschool right now is that it's growing at such a huge rate. The best numbers, it's really difficult for anybody in the country to identify the actual growth rate of homeschool because a lot of states don't require notification. In our state, for example, I'm required to send an affidavit with the names of all of my children I'll be homeschooling that year.
Oh, okay.
And so in the state of Utah, we can get a fairly accurate number of how many people are homeschooling. In other states, that's not the case, and so it's really hard to get an accurate estimate of how fast homeschooling is growing. But the most recent research that I've seen suggests that homeschool is growing at about 7% a year.
Wow.
Nationwide. So it really is, and there's lots of reasons for it. There's lots of reasons why people homeschool, anything from the ability to give an individualized curriculum, especially if your child has some special needs, whether that's an autism or an Asperger's, or I have one girl. You mentioned I've been teaching for 12 years. I teach in a religious seminary that's adjacent to the high school, and so one of the things that our public schools have once they get to the 9th grade is a course called, or an elective called the release time. And parents sign and they give their children permission to leave the campus and come over to the seminary. And then we're able to talk about scriptures and ethics and all the things that the public school can't talk about. I've been doing that for 12 years, and I've been able to see I get a lot of public school kids, but we also get homeschool kids whose parents drop them off and pick them up. And I just recently, this year, I had a student who was homeschooled because of some sensory perception anxiety, that when she gets in a really busy environment, her senses become super hypersensitive. So her parents public school just didn't work for them, because in classes, I don't know what they're like where you're at, but our public school classes, the average class size continues to grow every single year. At our high school, an average math class for regular math is between 34 and 38 kids in a classroom.
Oh, jeez.
So that's really tough for somebody in this girl's situation. So homeschooling was the perfect solution for her. And health concerns are another reason why some people do homeschooling, at least temporarily. You get a long stint with mono.
Right.
Homeschool can fit in, you can do a term or 2 terms. So those are some of the real pros or some of the real positive aspects to homeschooling. For us personally, none of our children don't have any of those issues, but some of the reasons why we've chosen to do it is we really like the opportunity to let our children take control of their learning a little bit and be a little more self-directed and tell us what they want to learn about. We really like the autonomy there. We get to pick the curriculum and how that curriculum is carried out. I know that a lot of parents across the country right now are up in arms about Common Core and the way different school districts are implementing Common Core. With homeschooling, we just kind of need to make sure we know what's on the ACT and the SATs and what the colleges require for credits in each of those major areas, English and math and science and social science. And as long as we're providing acceptable courses in each of those areas, one of my biggest concerns was my kids wouldn't be able to get into college. But I found that as long as I'm documenting and I'm keeping track, universities actually, even the Ivy League universities, really get excited when they see a homeschool child come into their application process that has documented what they've done, that's been a self-learner, self-directed learner. And it really provides some real exciting opportunities for the homeschooled child.
Wow. Now, so when I started tutoring probably over 12 years ago, I had a homeschool situation. There was a kid who actually, he was born with dwarfism, and he was having this major surgery on his legs to straighten them out. And, here I am, I'm an educator, so I have some skills, but I was asked to basically teach him every day, Monday through Friday, and the school provided me with the curriculum. But I was thinking, if that school didn't provide me with a curriculum, I wouldn't even know what to do first, second, third, or fourth. So the question I have for you is, is homeschooling difficult? Can anybody do it? I don't even know if I could do it. I'm an educator, but maybe it's easier than I think.
You could totally do it. I tell parents all the time that as a parent, at the root of everything else, the very first thing you are is a teacher. Think about what parents have already taught their children before they go to school. They've taught them how to talk. They've taught them how to walk. They've taught them how to share. Hopefully we've tried to teach them how to, we've taught them how to go to the bathroom. Parents are teachers by nature. Now, one of the challenges that we have is, especially as our children get into the 8th and 9th grades, okay, now I can't just be the, cutesy fluffy, let's do a little learning and then go play thing. There are some actual things I've got to be covering so that my children are getting ready for standardized testing, so that my children are getting ready they've got to be ready to work in the real world, and they have to be able to work with other people. And so that becomes a concern of, okay, how do I teach them math so that when they get to 11th grade and it's time to take the ACT, they know something more than simple addition.
Right.
And there's, within the world, in the world that we live in, that's actually really easier than we think. Now, there's a lot of there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can actually just order the curriculum through a Math UC or an AOP, or there's several different places that will actually offer you a curriculum that gives you lesson 1, 2, 3, and you just kind of follow that sequentially. Mm-hmm. That works great for some personalities. Okay. For others, there's more of a concept-based curriculum. There's my favorite app on the internet right now, or my favorite app on my iPad, and they also have a website, is Khan Academy.
Perfect.
And Khan Academy is, I think it's outstanding. And I don't have any affiliation with them. I don't get any kickback for recommending them.
Just like it.
In fact, I set all of my kids up, have their own Khan Academy account, and as a parent, they go onto the app or onto the website and they work through different concepts. And they can do math, and they've got an economics section, and they've just introduced a programming, basic programming. My son came to me and showed me how he had used programming language. This is a 7th grader I don't know anything about computer programming or anything like that. And so he brings this to me and shows me that he's created an H with 3 rectangles, but he's used computer programming to define the heights and the sizes and the widths. And this is all just from their little tutorials that they have. So that it's really great that way. But my favorite part about it as the parent is I can get on and I can pull up their accounts through my account as the parent, and I can see where they're spending their time. I can see which concepts they're struggling with. They have a way to track which ones they're brushing over or they're just kind of skipping to get to other things.
Right.
So it really gives me, it really is a powerful tool for parents who want to do more, but don't really feel like they're able to because they don't have, your training's in law, it might not be in education, or you might be, my dad was an electrician, and I know that he would have felt totally out of his comfort zone taking on the responsibility of getting me ready for college, even though he had the ability. It really, without those tools and those organization tools, it would have been difficult for him to know which concepts I should know and which ones I'm struggling with. And so the tools through the internet really make that an easier transition for parents.
And make homeschooling more practical now.
Yeah, it really does. And the other thing you have, and lots of states are doing this, for a year or so, we did, in Utah, it's called K-12, where one of the school districts, they provide, we jumped online, we enrolled our children through it, and they provided, we got to pick the classes we wanted, and then they actually mailed us all of the books and the maps and all of the materials. And so for the math class that they did, they actually got some manipulative, some blocks that they could use to work with fractions and multiplication. We got a big map that went on our wall, and it was offered through the public school system. And they have a mentor or a teacher that actually follows up with each one of our children. We have a parent account, so again, like Khan Academy, we could go and look and see how they're doing. So there's more and more opportunities, and there's more and more as we get to be familiar with those tools. As a parent, we get empowered, and it may not be to homeschool, but it may just be to offer our child who's struggling with math another resource.
Oh, definitely, like a supplement.
Yeah, and I really think all the research that I've done, it really, to me, pans down kids' success, a child's success in school comes down to one factor, I really believe, and I understand socioeconomic, all of that is involved, but if you have active, engaged parents in that learning process, my own parents, for example, I remember one day my dad was working, I was a 7th or 8th grader, and he was working in Big Sky, Montana. We were in southeastern Idaho, and I got a report card. It was Wednesday, and I still remember because I was so scared when I looked at that, and I had a D and a C, and I just knew that wasn't going to be acceptable, but I also knew that Dad wasn't coming home until Saturday, so I was going to be okay. I had a couple of days. and it's Wednesday night about 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden there's a big knock on my bedroom door, and I'm thinking, that's not my mom.
Oh.
And I open the door, and here's my dad, who has driven all the way home from Big Sky, Montana, because when my mom got my report card, she called him and said, hey, these are Brian's grades. And, you know, my parents have faults like everybody's, but when it came to school, my dad and my mom really expected me to give my very best, and it was important to them. And I didn't understand until the Dominican Republic why education was important or the opportunities that were sitting in my hands.
Yeah.
But I knew that it was important for my parents, and my dad drove all the way home, gave me a big lecture. I still remember he looked at the C, and he said, he looked at the D, and he said, I'm not even going to talk about the D. He said, but the C is average, and you are not average.
Right.
He said, you can do better than this. And it turned into about a 1 hour conversation, and voices. He never raised his voice at me, but more than the words, the fact that he would drive all that way, and I knew that meant that he'd have to get to bed early so that he could be up about 3 in the morning so that he'd be back on the job at 7 in the morning.
Right.
It just made this huge influence, this impact on me. I didn't get another C until my freshman year in college.
Wow.
And I really think, as I've read through lots and lots of research throughout my PhD in educational leadership, I really believe that parents who get engaged with the learning process at any level, for me, it was just my dad driving home made this massive, had this massive impact on me and my effort that I gave in school for the next 5 or 6 years.
Wow. How does one, you know, I took a look at your website, and it is full of content, really good content. And how does one use your website, 101homeschoolideas.com, to help his or her child?
Oh, that's a great question, because up until just about a week ago, we decided to transfer our domain, and so it's been completely down and unusable, but we're getting in the process. We got that back up this week, and one of the things that we hope to create on there is a page where, or a starting location, a homeschool parent who is just starting to homeschool or is facing that January, February burnout. In fact, I'm right now writing an article on February burnout. We start August, September, really excited about the school year. Everything's going well. By the time we hit February, we're just fantasizing about June.
Right.
And so one of the things that I think causes teacher burnout, whether that's in a public school or a homeschool or charter school or any private school, is we teach a lesson, and then there's instantaneously that pressure that I have to have a lesson for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we hope to do is to be able to just put out a whole bunch of ideas on that website that you can go to and say, you know what, I need a creative writing lesson for today that's just canned. It's just right there. The one I just sent out to people who subscribed to our newsletter, I just sent out five creative writing lessons that are just canned, ready to go. You can give them to your children. If they're old enough, you could just give them the instructions and say, here's your assignment, go do that, let me know when you're done. Mm-hmm. A couple of my favorites, I always suggest that parents have their kids create a new superhero. I just went to the Captain America movie. Our world is saturated in superheroes right now, and our kids love them. Have them create a new superhero, and I have a list of about 15 or 20 questions that you have to answer in a story about your superhero. How did he get his power? Where did he come from? What's his name? Who are his best friends? Who's his biggest enemy? And it just goes on and on. And so then what the children do, all they have to do is go down and find those questions, and they write a story that answers those questions. I had another. I think I might do that one. It's a fun one. That's probably one of my favorites. The other one that has been really popular through our comments and emails to me is the peanut butter and jelly instruction manual. Have your children write out a manual step by step that tells you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then for lunchtime that day, you use that manual to actually make lunch. And it's fun because the kids almost always leave out some, they leave off some instruction. And so I tell parents, do it exactly the way they tell you to, and don't do anything that they don't tell you to. So if they say take some peanut butter and put it on the bread. Well, they didn't tell you to get a knife.
Right.
So use your hand and get your hand in there and I've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of emails and comments on the website saying that was so much fun. And really, that's my overall goal, is to put ideas out on the internet where parents can find them, that are going to have the kids coming back, laughing and giggling throughout the whole learning process, so that we can help our kids change their mentality about schooling. Learning isn't something that ends when you graduate high school or college. Learning is something that goes for the rest of your life. And when we dread learning, we get into a situation where after college we get into a job, but we don't want to learn anymore. So we come home and we sit in front of the television and we just let the media fill us, and we just learn whatever they want to put on the sitcoms for that night. Where if we were to create a generation of kids who loved to learn, they would leave college with their diploma and schooling might be done, but they would go into their job, whatever it is, and they would continue to learn, and they would become the best at what they do. I pick our family physician. I go to him because he is constantly researching. He talks to me when I go in there. I ask him what he's been researching or what different symposiums he's been to, and he always has an answer for me. He always has something he's been reading or something he's researching himself or a presentation he's going to give. And he's somebody who loves to learn. Even though school's done for him, the learning never stops.
Wow, that's a good way to pick a doctor. That's great. Tell us, Brian, a little bit about your weekly podcast and how do you use your podcast to help families?
Well, my podcast, to be honest, my website actually came second to my podcast. I have a brother-in-law who has done a lot with internet. He's way into photography, and while he was in law school, he started a photography blog, and it grew and grew through his 3 years in law school. Graduated from law school, he took the bar, passed the bar, and then decided he didn't want to do anything with law because he was having so much fun with his photography website. And he and I were talking, and he said, "You've got to do something with podcasting. Podcasting is so much fun." And I expressed to him that I had been a little disappointed. I hadn't been able to do much with my education, my degree. Mm-hmm. I graduated a year ago, and I hadn't been able to do very much with it. There's not a lot of opportunities to use the degree in the teaching that I do here in the seminary. And so he said, "That's it. That's how you're going to do podcasting. Find a way to use your degree and podcast. Do a podcast." So I sat down with my wife and we started brainstorming ideas. And my wife reminded me of how much trouble she had getting started into homeschooling, and the fact that she felt all alone, and the fact that there were times where she just would almost get depressed about, I can never do this. She wanted to do it so bad, and she felt driven to do it, but she just didn't. She just lacked the motivation sometimes. And so I decided that we would do a podcast where I would do interviews. It initially started out with the idea I was just going to do interviews. I was going to interview homeschoolers or homeschool curriculum developers or anybody that could be influential. In fact, I just did an interview with an admissions, the senior person on the admissions council at Ohio State University. And so that was kind of where I started with it. And I just wanted to give ideas, let parents who were being successful with their homeschool tell us how they were being successful. And I thought maybe that would be just a great little community builder.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's kind of where I started from it. And then somebody said, "Why don't you do a website?" And so it's kind of behind the curve a little bit. I think most people start with the website and get into the podcast. But my hope with that, I've changed a little bit as I've gotten feedback from some of our listeners. I still do the interviews. I just did the interview, like I say, with the person from admissions at Ohio State University. But I've changed that a little bit more to where I'm sharing some of the things I've learned through 12 years of teaching in a classroom, different skills to lead conversations and to get, how to ask questions that open conversations instead of shut them down. that I think is, whether you're a homeschool parent or you're teaching in the public schools, that's a skill that is critical, and it's been really a focus of my professional development every year that I've been teaching. So I develop little podcasts that talk about those things. The most recent one that I just did, that just went live on Tuesday, dealt with, it helped parents find a way or figure out how to get peer reviews going on in their homeschools, with whether it's child to child or identifying another homeschool student from another family that can do a peer review. A lot of research says that students, when they know they're writing to their peers, they do a better job. They work a little bit harder.
Right.
Learning increases when they're having to grade. And so I just gave 5 important tips to make sure that the peer review is accomplishing the goals of increased learning. So that was Tuesdays, things like that, and it's been by far my favorite part of what I've been doing with homeschooling has been the podcast.
Oh, that's great. And the accountability of the peer review is fantastic.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
You know, the podcast is just exciting. I mean, even over here, I mean, couldn't tell you how many times the families asked me about homeschooling, and I just had no idea. So this is just going to be a place that I'll point them towards to learn.
Oh, I hope so. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really think that the sky is the limit, and the thing I love about podcasting is that it's this free resource that's out there, and we have this opportunity to go out and just glean and gain from the experience of others. I've gained a lot from other people's podcasts and have really enjoyed just the free resource.
Absolutely. So, Brian, tell us just a little bit about your youth leadership development work that you do, your coaching, and what do you get out of it?
One of my favorite, my very favorite aspect of my PhD was the leadership side. I'm fascinated with leadership theory. I really love to take theories that businesses apply and bring them into personal lives and see if they fit. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes, theories about how to invest $3.4 million don't necessarily trickle down into my own personal finances, but that's all right. But theory on motivation, for example, all of the research on motivation talks about if I'm intrinsically motivated, if I'm doing something because inside I love it, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to be more efficient, and I'm going to be way more successful than if somebody's dangling a carrot and trying to extrinsically motivate me to do that same job. Right. And I think for our children, if they can come to understand that idea, especially in those stages of schooling when the 16, 17, 18 years old, when we're starting to really ask the questions, what do you want to do with the rest of your life, and how are you going to get there? I want them to understand those theories of motivation, because what really, I think, if you look across the country, what's happening is kids are picking careers based on extrinsic motivators. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with this leadership development is not necessarily, I'm not trying to develop the next generation of CEOs, but when I go out and speak to groups of youth, and it's very rare, it's almost always in an academic high school setting. A few talks I've given at universities. My favorite part about it is it's given me an opportunity to teach and to talk to youth about things that will really impact their lives, open their eyes to something that will change them forever. And they may not ever be a CEO, but they're going to make better decisions because of the things that we talk about when I'm with them. So that most of it's done through motivational speaking assignments here and there across the country. Okay. I'm really this has been just kind of a newer development that a new little adventure that I've started the last few months. So I'm excited to get this started and watch where it takes me.
That's great. And what advice would you give to the teens, to a teen who's struggling during this kind of confusing time, and having to face the, next level, which is just life in the real world?
Two things. First of all, I would say find something you love.
Okay.
Find something that you can get extremely passionate about. And I don't care what it is. Just get that down on paper. Something that you really, when you wake up in the morning, you are going to be so excited about, and eventually you'll find a way to incorporate that into your life. It may not be directly,
okay,
but you'll find a way to get that motivation, that excitement. And in the Dominican Republic, they have a word in Spanish called animo, and it's the English word excitement is kind of it, but it's not really. It's like an explosive excitement. And somehow we need to get kids who are explosively excited about what they're doing. And so the first thing I would say is find something you're extremely passionate about. Maybe it's motocross, maybe it's skateboarding, maybe it's dogs or horses, maybe it's programming or design, art, whatever it is. Find something you're really passionate about and start doing it. Start developing those skills. And you may not make money at it for a long time, or you may never make money at it, but you've got to have that passion in your life. It's tragic. They did a study near where I live, and this has been about 8 years ago, but at the time, the average teenager, 16 to 18 years old, was spending almost 20 hours a week watching television or playing video games or surfing the internet.
Wow.
And that,
wow.
When we have those passions in our lives, we don't fill our lives with a bunch of wasters.
Right.
So find something you're passionate about. The next thing I would say is, and this may come off a little bit harsh, but this world doesn't owe you anything.
Right.
The very worst thing we can do for our development or our growth is to buy into the entitlement attitude that so many people are getting, not just teenagers, but even some of the grown adults in this country. This idea that somebody owes me something.
Mm-hmm.
Living in this country is such a privilege. It's the one thing I learned in the Dominican Republic. I remember one experience I had down there. We went down to the embassy in Santo Domingo, and I walked into the United States Embassy, and there was a Marine with an M16 and the flag flying over top of him. And it was this emotional experience that I had. I was 20 years old, and for the first time in 18 months, I felt like I was really, truly safe. I saw somebody with a machine gun that I trusted holding the machine gun. Living in this country is an absolute privilege. It's not. We have so many opportunities, and as a result of those opportunities, we need to take responsibility for our lives. We need to take direction. We need to take initiative. And the sooner we get out of that entitlement or somebody owes me something mentality, the faster we're going to get our lives on track. And so get away from the victim stance, that idea that I am who I am because something happened to me. Every person has the opportunity to make a choice right now to go out and do something and be proactive. And that's, I think, those two things. If you can find something you can be passionate about and get past the entitlement idea that's so prevalent, that's a teenager that's bound for success.
Wow. Really well said. So Brian, how can we find you, and how can we get more of you? Please plug yourself.
No problem. Probably the easiest way to find me on iTunes is if you just go and type 101 Homeschool Ideas there in the search bar. I'll come up. If you just do Homeschool Ideas, okay. I'm number one right there in the podcast. So go find us on iTunes. You can also find us on Stitcher by doing the same search. You can find me on the website at www.101homeschoolideas.com. That's 101, the numbers, and then homeschoolideas.com. I'm on Facebook at Make Education Matter, and you can find me at Twitter with a similar handle, Make Ed Matter. Those are probably the easiest ways. Anybody that wants to email me, my personal email is Brian, Brian, at 101homeschoolideas.com. I would love to hear from anybody. If you've got questions about homeschool, we actually just started a new segment of our podcast called Ask Brian, where you can go to the website. If you go to 101homeschoolideas.com/Ask Brian, it'll bring you to a page where you can leave me a voice message and then ask your question or make your comment about homeschool, and then we're going to start putting those into the podcast. Probably start doing that sometime in May. And so we'll start answering the questions that people have from some of our listeners.
Oh, wow. This is perfect. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing, what you're doing. And, I'm inspired, and I'm sure everyone's going to be inspired listening to this. I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I really, when we find something we're passionate about and somebody gives you an opportunity to talk about it, I've been excited to do this ever since you and I talked.
Perfect. All right, that's awesome, and looking forward to connecting more in the future.
For sure.
Thanks. Well, this wraps up our show today with Brian Ricks, who's educator and founder of 101 Homeschool Ideas. To learn more about Brian and get homeschooling ideas, please visit 101homeschoolideas.com. Thank you for joining us today on Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration.